Welcome and thank you for being here with us in a new webinar from Clat World Languages. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, which is called Cultural Exploration Through Teen Eyes. We're gonna see building authentic links with Spanish and French-speaking cultures. Even though we're gonna hear a lot about California, this webinar is very useful for anyone, for any state and any circumstances. And it is also my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today, Ivan Ferrero. So, Ivan is someone we know very well. He's one of our K-12 sales consultants. He has completed world language studies in Spain, the UK, and the USA with an MA in literature, cultures, and languages in the University of Connecticut. He was also a language teacher for over 10 years. And moreover, he's a travel enthusiast and a passionate person about world languages. Ivan, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you. So what are we going to see today? We're going to start with some initial reflection that's going to take us to the idea of, first of all, just going over what Gen Z looks like in the classroom. Obviously, each student is different, but what are the common traits that typically we have noticed with this generation that's right now in their teenage years and early college years? What is culture? What is what we understand by culture? How does culture reflect in the classroom? And we're also going to go over the California World Language Standards and what they have to say about culture. Also, the challenges of using culture in the classroom. And for here, I decided to look back on my own experience as an educator, but I will also like to hear from you. What are some of the challenges that you are experiencing trying to teach culture in your classes? We will present some solutions to create meaningful intercultural connections. We will use a then and now chart, and we will use the ideas from these solutions, from this chart, and the different challenges that I will present in order to show you a bit of the approach that Reporteros and Reporter Francophone, our middle school and high school French and Spanish series, does in order to create authentic cultural connections. I will use examples from our series, but of course, this is just to give you ideas, whether you are currently using our programs, considering them, or not using them at all. We just hope that this is something that you can later use for your own classes. And if possible, we will have some time for a few questions. So let's dig in. What does Gen Z typically look like in the classroom? Obviously, this is just a generalization. We know that each student is different, but some things that we know is definitely that it's the most diverse generation in the United States. 48% of them come from diverse ethnic and racial origin. It's also a generation that has grown up with this awareness of equality and equity. We also usually call them digital natives. Because it's a generation that has already grown up around the screens. The problem with this, something that I observed in the classroom a lot, and probably many of you have noticed too, is that even though they're surrounded by screens all the time, sometimes they don't really know how to use it very well for the academic purposes that we want them to use the technology. And of course, there's a strong mental health awareness. They have it, and those of us that are from other generations also have it, because in general, the world is more aware right now around mental health. Sometimes we notice that there is a problem with them being a lonely generation, precisely because a lot of those interactions happen online, and there is a strong component of socio-emotional learning. Having said that, what is culture in the language classroom? And obviously, a lot of times when we talk about culture, we discuss culture with a big C and with a small c. And it is important to make our students aware that culture is all around us and that it is not simply a book or an art gallery. Culture can also be things such as this ad for a couscous brand in Morocco. Culture can also be La Voz Kids, which is a Colombian version of the show The Voice. Culture can also be comic books, movies. Culture can also be a schedule for classes in a high school. So culture is definitely all around us in many different ways. And this brings me a little bit to the actual idea of perspectives, products, and practices. So we do have the products, which is the tangible items. So that can be the books or the different tools, the music, the games. We have the practices, which are the patterns of those social interactions. And then we have the perspectives that we adopt towards those patterns. And in the case of California World Language Standards, I would like you here to pay attention to the part that I highlighted in this paragraph. While acquiring knowledge of products, practices, and perspectives of the target cultures, learners engage in comparisons of similarities and differences among their cultures and the target ones. So obviously, it's not just about exploring the culture, but also an exercise of critical thinking in which our own culture is also involved. And that's what we definitely should strive to do in the classroom. Create those bridges, those connections between the culture of the target language and our own. Going through the specific culture standards among the California World Language Standards, obviously, it very specifically says here that in the cultural comparisons, these comparisons are going to be done through similarities and differences among the target cultures and the culture that they know. So obviously, it is no surprise that our institutions, our official organizations think that teaching culture is something very important that we should definitely do. But now I want to actually hear from you. I want you to think a bit of what are some of the challenges of presenting culture in the classroom. So we have a QR code here that you can use to participate and give some of your experiences so that we can compare them against my own experiences that I'm going to illustrate in just a moment.
In case the QR code is not working for you, we just put also the link in the chat, and we're going to read the answers shortly as they come. Okay, we're getting some answers. So we have lack of authentic material. We also have the student's mindset. Some of my students don't seem interested in learning about other cultures. Possibly teaching a Spanish class that is required but not elective. Okay, also disinterest in elements that are too different from what they are used to. Disagreement with practices of the Hispanics. Find good resources and creating activities that supports language learning. Okay, this is some of the replies that we're getting. I don't know if you want to wait for a few more or if this is okay, Van.
I think we can keep going. Some of these are great. Thank you so much, and definitely many of them connect with what I'm going to say. Definitely lack of materials, the fact that it is a requirement, that's a huge struggle. Obviously, the students do not have sometimes the passion that we do have for languages. The lack of interest, obviously the apathy, which goes with the age, with the general idea of I don't want to go to class or learning this. Elements that can be too difficult. These are all definitely great ideas, and many of them connect with what is my own experience. So obviously, the first thing I thought of with what is a big hurdle of trying to teach culture in the classroom is the lack of engagement and interest, right? Something that's perceived as boring. If you mention the word, even just by saying the word culture, probably is going to be a great turnoff for a lot of the students right away. Limited knowledge of the world sometimes, and this is not their fault. They're very young people, and you know the scope of the Spanish-speaking and French-speaking world is enormous. So sometimes they have a very small knowledge of it. The difficulty to reach out to every background sometimes that's represented in the classroom can be a difficulty. If you have a classroom with students that come from many different places, and some of them are heritage speakers of the language that you're teaching, and it's not always easy to reach out to everything. And we as teachers, we do not know every single Spanish or French speaking community in depth. Sometimes cultural content gets in the way because we do have a curriculum, we do have some vocabulary and grammar goals that we need to cover, and we feel like a culture lesson is disrupting our goals. And in certain cases, there are stereotypes, strong stereotypes that can really prevent us, or that the students are holding on to, and they're difficult to knock down. And in some cases, it's just very difficult to find authentic resources. When we want to do a very accurate cultural lesson, a lot of times it's great when we have an authentic resource, and it can be very, very hard to find. So all of these are definitely consistent and common problems of trying to teach culture in the classroom. What are some of the general solutions that we can provide for that? Well, obviously, we need to acknowledge that a lot of times the students will start around stereotypes and a very basic and not in-depth knowledge about a place, but it can be a great point for self-reflection and say, okay, why do you think like this? Why do you hold this stereotype? Where does this come from? And how can we work towards improving and broaden your mind about this? Also, incorporate many different cultures where the target language is spoken, or bringing other languages and cultures. Definitely, we don't want to stick to just one community because, especially considering the diversity that we were mentioning earlier, um, one thing that's also important is to try and focus ourselves, the teacher, as the facilitator, not as the one that's going to explain everything, but more so the one that's going to help the students discover that culture. And definitely what I think is most important is to try and integrate those cultural comparisons in small ways, daily and thematically. So the culture doesn't have to be presented as this is the culture, but something that's just integrated within the activities, because as we saw before, it is all around us. Culture can be a school schedule, it can be an advertisement, it can be many different things. So it doesn't even have to be announced, it just have to be incorporated organically. So one thing that the World Language Framework in California tells us is definitely the need to update teaching methods for cultural connection, and it emphasizes the dynamic teaching for cultural understanding. One thing that we are going to be using today with the examples that I'm going to show is a then and now chart. A then and now chart that what it is going to do is eliminate the transformation from traditional practices to research-driven methodologies. So what it is, what we used to do, and what is that we need to be doing now. So just to give you some examples of these charts, some of them that connect with the solutions that I was mentioning before, going from a teacher-centered class to a learner-centered with the teacher as the facilitator, as the collaborator. Definitely going from the textbook as the curriculum to thematic units and authentic resources. This is what's going to help us incorporate the culture in an organic way and contextualized by creating our lessons around specific grounded themes that hopefully help us connect our own community with the community that we are studying. The isolated cultural factoids, moving that to an emphasis on the relationship among the perspectives, practices, and products. So instead of just dropping cultural data here and there, let's just make it the center of the unit. And definitely create personalized real-world tasks. So if we move to a task-based approach in which we use backward design and we have our goals and we present very specific communicative context in which the culture is incorporated, we're going to help the students understand the usefulness of the culture in the class. So we're going to go through some strategies to develop cultural exploration. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to use examples from our Spanish and French series, Reporteros, Reporters Francophones. And more specifically, I am going to be using examples from level 2, from the novice high to intermediate low. Before I say that, before I move on to that, I wanted to mention that for those of you in California, we do have very specific information for the California World Language Standards. You just need to go to our website, cletwl.com/California. If you are watching us from another state, please also feel free to go to our website and explore, because we do have very similar information for other states. So how can Reporteros and Reporter Francophone help us create a relevant cultural connection? So first of all, for those of you that may not be familiar with the series, I just want to give you an overview of it. So this is a thematic series in which each of the units in all of the levels takes place at a specific French or Spanish speaking community. And the person that is going to discover that community for us is one of these reporteros or reporters who is a native of that community. So for instance, here in the center, you can see that's Yassir from Morocco. So there is a full unit that takes place in Morocco, and Yassir is going to be kind of like our guide of that place. So definitely this series feels like our students are taking part in a language and culture immersion program at these places. So each of the units takes place at a different place, and this is going to bring a lot of diversity and a very good cultural reach. And the reason why they're called reporters is because part of the unit contains a magazine that's written by them, and that is going to help us broaden the themes that are presented in each of the units. So in order to keep this presentation very cohesive, as I mentioned earlier, I am going to be using examples from level 2 of the series, level 2 of Reporter Francophone and level 2 of Reporteros. And most of these examples are going to come from the same unit. For Reporter Francophone 2, they're coming from Unité 6, for those of you that are using the book, and for Reporteros 2, they come from Unidad 4. So we are going to be seeing a lot of these two wonderful girls, Juliette and Fernanda, who are going to be ambassadors to their land. The French unit takes place in Strasbourg, a city in France at the border with Germany, and the Spanish one takes place in Costa Rica. So one thing that we always do in order to make sure that we introduce the cultural element is to always start with a video. And in our case, because our units are thematic, this video always starts with a presentation in which the reporter is going to introduce herself. She's going to tell us where she's from, things that she likes to do, and definitely her video is also going to connect with the overall theme of the unit, whether it's food, sports, environment, etc. One thing that is great about using these videos, whether you're using cultural videos from a textbook or videos that you found online, is to definitely try and play with them and turn them into listening and reading activities. I will tap more into that later, how by using the script of the video, you can definitely play around with it a lot, and it's definitely going to become very visually appealing for the students. So instead of just using the technology as a cool tool and saying, hey, we're using a video, what we're doing is integrating the technology into the instruction, because in these videos, since they open the unit, the students are going to be able to definitely understand what kind of language and communication they're going to be learning. So let me see. Here is an example from Spanish. This is the opening for the Spanish unit. It's called Pura Vida because it's centered around Costa Rica. For those of you that are considering our series or using them, one thing that's important to know is that the videos get longer in the upper level. So they tend to be maybe just about a minute long for level 1. And then in level 2, they go to 2 to 3 minutes. And the structure is kept throughout all the levels of the series, level 1, level 2, level 3. We are always going to start with this introductory video, the objectives of the unit, and a presentation of the country or area that is being visited. But definitely to give you a better sense of it, I'm going to play just a little excerpt of each of the videos. In the French unit, this chapter is centered around the environment, and for the Spanish one is centered around nature, but also well-being.
Es muy importante tener hábitos saludables. Me encanta correr. A veces también surfeo, hago ciclismo y natación. Algunos de los deportistas ticos que admiro son el ciclista André Amador, la boxeadora Yocasta Valle, la nadadora Camila Hasse y la surfista Jimena Ruiz.
So in this Spanish video, because it's around well-being, sports, the reporter Fernanda has introduced some of the main sports people in Costa Rica, and previously she mentioned the importance of playing sports. I will play the French video again. I apologize for the sound issue.
Une ville qui se préoccupe de l'environnement. Une grande partie du centre-ville est réservée aux piétons et les Strasbourgeois se déplacent aussi souvent à vélo. Moi, je m'intéresse beaucoup à la protection de l'environnement. Je suis sûre que Strasbourg peut être une ville encore plus verte. Pendant mon temps libre, je suis bénévole dans une association.
So one thing that you may have noticed in these two videos is that the language that's used is very natural. The students are very relatable because they are the age of the students that we teach. And it combines a lot of real pictures and videos of the place, of the location. We have seen people from Costa Rica. We have seen locations in the city of Strasbourg. Another great way to definitely incorporate the culture is by referring to real documents. And one thing that I actually love to use in the classroom is ads, posters, many of them coming from official government campaigns, because they tend to be definitely very visually appealing. And they can provide a great way to immerse our students, get them engaged into the local culture with a document that was actually created for the local people. Official governmental campaigns is definitely something that I really love, because they're meant to be clearly understood, and this brings a lot of realism. So in this case, you can see what we sometimes like to do is to present the goals of our lessons with one of those authentic documents. So in this case, in Lección 1 for Spanish, Disfruta de la vida, enjoy life, it has a poster that promotes Costa Rica and says, Costa Rica, más pura vida que nunca, more pure life than ever. And for, excuse me, for the French one, we have La Semaine de l'Environnement à Strasbourg. So the week of the environment week. And the unit is called We Help Each Other, on s'entraide. So again, instead of using just the book as the curriculum, we are using thematic units and authentic resources. So we are not telling the student, okay, look, this is culture. We are just inserting it literally into our linguistic and communicative goals. So just to dig in a little more, here you can see another authentic document, Mémotrice. So this is a campaign from the French government to remind people how to sort and how to do recycling. And this very simple document can already bring a lot of cultural elements. We can always definitely start by showing the students, okay, what are things that you notice that are different here? One thing that I realized when I am originally from Spain, and when I go back home and I have American friends who visit, they notice all of the different bins and recycle things, and they're like, okay, where I am from, at least in the part of the United States where I live, we do not sort the recycling. Everything just goes onto our recycling bin. So this can be a great conversation with the students, and this is a one way of teaching culture that belongs into everyday life without having to present it in a very grandiose way. And just to give you an example, so what we do with these authentic documents, and you can do with the ones that you find or that you like to use, is definitely always start off with the observation. And then, as you can see, we're incorporating the grammatical goals. In this case, we want to teach the verb jeter, which is to throw away, and the expression il faut, it is necessary to, in order to, we're using it along with this document. So the grammar and vocabulary comes kind of organically inserted and very contextualized in this sense. And then what we do is that we like to put the actual full grammar and vocabulary pages towards the end of the units. And definitely something I recommend is to definitely provide your students with these lists of vocabulary and grammar charts, and present them once you have covered that activity. I think it's a great way to remind them, okay, as we were doing that very authentic, specific task, now we can review this. One thing that we definitely like to do is to make sure that the grammar and vocabulary is presented in a very visually appealing way, with color coding, definitely with pictures, so that it makes it very easy for the students to connect with the activities that they have already done. And to give you an example for Spanish, as I mentioned earlier, the Spanish unit revolves around well-being. So here is another official campaign from the Health Ministry of Costa Rica, el Ministerio de Salud de Costa Rica, in which they're giving us advice on
what to do in order to stay healthy. Cuida tu cuerpo, take care of your body, organiza tu rutina, organize your routine, filtra la información, filter your information, and haz cosas que te gustan. Do things that you like to do. In this unit, we want students to learn about body parts, health habits, and understand and give advice about well-being. So this public health campaign is definitely a great idea. And it has a great cultural component in the sense that because this was created for Costa Rican people, you can definitely compare with what are some campaigns that have been done in the United States, or do you agree? Do you think those are some of the best types of advice that we could be giving? So always definitely bring that to our own experience and the student's experience. In this particular example, the poster already has a lot of information and it does have a lot of verbs. So one thing that would be important in this case, if you use an authentic document that already has a lot of written information, is to try to scaffold it as much as possible. So we can start off with an interpreted mode in which we can definitely analyze the parts and do, as the suggestion says here, connect these sentences with the images so that we can start chunking it and help the students understand a little bit. And then because this campaign includes a lot of advice, it is using the command form, which is one of the linguistic goals of this unit. So definitely one thing that we can do is tell the students to find the verbs in context in there and start creating a chart. And because they have seen them in the authentic document, this is a way for them to realize that they're going to be learning a conjugation that has not just appeared out of thin air, but something that is actually used. One thing that I loved to do in the classroom was to show some of these slogans that are everywhere and very easy to find. And some of them actually already appear in Spanish, given the large Hispanic population that we have in our country, and definitely show those to your students and remind them that this type of language is all around us. To give you an example here about how we have taken the grammar that appeared in this authentic cultural document and the vocabulary also into the full vocab and grammar explanations. Again, highlighting the verbs that we are using the color coding. All of this, we are very meticulous about the grammar and vocabulary being very well connected with the activities. And I want to go back to the video ideas, because one thing that we definitely like to do is to include videos that come from real sources, from authentic organizations. And definitely that's something that you can also do in the classroom. So I'm going to show you this video, again, going back to Strasbourg and the idea of the environment. You're going to see a video that's from an association called Alsace Nature, in which this association, what they do is a river cleanup. So let's watch just a little excerpt of the video.
Merci d'être venu pour cette grande collecte de déchets donc initiée par Alsace Nature. Pendant que nous, on est réunis ici pour faire la collecte à pied, on a aussi une collecte qui a lieu dans l'eau, dans l'île, par des plongeurs qui remontent des déchets à la surface. C'est beaucoup de logistique parce qu'ils ont besoin d'un bateau qui les aide, etc. Donc ça a lieu sur l'île juste à côté.
So as you can see, this video is only 1.5 minutes long. Something that definitely I would recommend doing if you're teaching lower levels, intermediate levels, is to try to find a video that's short, or if it's a longer video, to chunk it into different parts and provide some scaffolding. And this is a video, as I mentioned earlier, about a river cleanup project that's carried out by this association in Strasbourg. So one thing that we can definitely do as previewing is first just observe, watch. Maybe you can play the video with no sound, just have the students guess. But there is definitely a great cultural component here in which the students can look at the city. The video contains different interviews to people in which the city's in the background. We can ask the students, what does the place look like? Why do you think the city has these issues? And what are some issues that can be happening in your community too? Definitely once we are watching the videos, when we can start inserting the specific vocabulary that we want them to learn, which in this case, it would be in the section C. And then it is always also very important to do an après la vidéo, so an after video activity in which we definitely continue to reflect on that connection between what's happening in Strasbourg, in this case, in France, and what could be happening in our community. What are some of the environmental challenges going on, and what are things that we can do? Here is the script to the video. And that is something that I also love to do in the classroom. In our case, for the videos that we have incorporated into our books, we always provide a script for the teacher. If you are using a video that you found yourself, if it's not a video that's very long, you can definitely type up the script or try to use the closed captioning, but definitely playing with a script can be a great either pre-activity or post-activity. In this case, I have grabbed this middle paragraph in which one of the people in the video is explaining what they do. And as you can see, I highlighted some of the recycling related words that are going to be some of the main concepts. So the sorting, the waste, the recycling, the plastic bottles, the trash in the house. So definitely we can do many activities here. We can also try to turn it into a filling the blanks activity in which the students listen to the video again and try to complete with the words. We can also have pictures of those words and try to connect them with the different words that we have highlighted. So we have multiple options here to play with the authentic video and the script of that video. And to give you an example from Costa Rica, one thing that we actually also have included in the Spanish version of our textbooks is a section that's called Para Saber Más. And what this section does, it's an enhanced PDF that has direct links to outside sources, to videos from YouTube, Spotify playlists, any other internet resources. So in this case, this article is going to describe the country of Costa Rica and its nature, and it can be used in combination with this video from the campaigns of Esencial Costa Rica. I actually loved using videos from Costa Rica in the classroom because the government has a lot of great videos in which they promote their country. They're very visually appealing, and even the narration is very simple and definitely can be used as a great way to introduce the country or as a great way to wrap up that presentation. As I mentioned earlier, each of our units contain a magazine article, and they're always going to revolve around cultural elements that are very, very recent. So everything is from after the year 2021. In this case, you can see an article about different associations in France. And one thing that we can do is always start the students by trying to connect with our own associations or our own experience. So for instance, the Red Cross, something that is international. What are some associations that seem only specifically from France? And definitely one thing that we do with these articles is to always, after introducing them, make the students be the ones that are going to do the research and that are going to connect the cultural element that's presented here with their own community. To give you an example from the Spanish unit, we have Deportes Sin Límites. This one describes sports adapted to people with disabilities. And again, there is always an invitation to the students to definitely have critical thinking and work beyond the article and become their own reporters. So always a very task-based approach. We have also made sure that we include activities that resonate with teenagers. So one great way in which you can present the culture is to try to present it, obviously using themes that are concerning or important or definitely discussed nowadays, and to try to use a format that the students are familiar with. So one thing that we like to do is to always introduce the lessons with this format that looks like a WhatsApp or iMessage, and to definitely include and discuss topics that the students can connect to. In this case, we have an article here that talks about harassment in schools and bullying. And in the French example, this activity is going to introduce Sciences et Vie Junior, which is a magazine that's aimed at teenagers about science and technology. And because it is very important to showcase the great diversity that we have in the Spanish and French speaking world, one thing that we definitely do is that each unit visits a different place. And even if some place appears in, again, in a different level, it will not be the same city or the same region. Definitely that's something that's great to incorporate, especially if you have students in your classrooms that come from very different backgrounds. It's important to try to make sure that they feel represented and that they understand the very large scope and diversity of Spanish and French speaking places. Obviously, I know that this is difficult sometimes to try to find different places, or maybe if we are from one of those Spanish or French speaking places, we're going to tend to gravitate towards that. So that's why we try to facilitate that and to help you by providing as much diversity in our units as possible. And one thing that we definitely make sure we did is that in our level 1, the first unit actually stays very close to home. In Spanish level 1, unit 1, we have Dana, a Mexican-American student who's from Chicago, so that we start by acknowledging the Hispanic population in the United States. And in the case of the French one, we have Max from Montreal, so that we actually acknowledge the closest French-speaking place that we have to the United States, which is Canada. So definitely going back to the idea that we are not just throwing in random cultural facts, but the culture of this reporter is going to guide the entire lesson. And that's a great way to make sure that the students get really imbued into that culture. And we have created series that are definitely very project-based. By creating them being project-based, we can make sure that the culture is studied in a contextualized way and in a communicative way and in a way that the students find very practical. These projects that we have included are realistic, relatable, they are relevant to the country or region that is being covered. And what we do is that we have 3 projects, 2 that we call mini projects because they are used to wrap up a lesson, and one that is called a final project that we use in order to conclude a full unit. This is an example of a mini project that we have in our Costa Rica unit. It's called Una Campaña Informativa, an informational campaign. So definitely something that is very simple and something that the students have already practiced. So in a Costa Rica unit, the students already earlier on were presented with different healthy habits and government campaigns that encouraged being healthy. So now you as the student are going to create a campaign to your school. So definitely it's a great way to make sure that the culture that was presented earlier from another place now is going to be useful for you and for your own community. So definitely the teacher here is only going to have an informational purpose. I mean, you are very important as the teacher, as the person who is going to guide that, but the student is going to be the doer and the creator. This is an example from a different unit that's centered around travel in the country of Argentina. And here you can see a final project. So the final project is just a more extended version of those mini projects and definitely can be a great way to wrap up those units. So whether you use our books or not, definitely it is great to have a task-based approach and a project-based approach in which there is always a clear end goal that has been presented to the students from the beginning. So instead of just turning in the work for the teacher, the students are sharing and publish for the target culture. So the student is definitely involved in that creative part. And definitely it is important to include culture as part of the assessments. And that's something that I found very hard sometimes when I was a teacher. And in certain times I regretted it, not including more of the cultural component. By including it in the assessment, you are making the student aware that it is important to learn it, that they're not just there to learn words and grammar conjugations, but that actually they're there to learn about another place and to self-reflect about their own community. So definitely it is great to include rubrics that you should show to the student beforehand so that the student knows what expectations they are going to have, what criteria. And sometimes it's can be just as simple as creating cultural charts in which the students have to do a comparison of the target culture in their own country. So what are some takeaways that we would like to share with you regarding culture? First of all, obviously, the culture should not be presented in a vacuum, right? That idea that we saw in the then and now of the cultural factoids. Culture should just be guiding your entire lessons and, if possible, your entire units. It should be a recurring theme and definitely something that doesn't need to be presented as its own separate section. It doesn't have to be that page in a traditional textbook that is like, oh, this is the cultural page. No, everything can be guided through the culture. And it can be done in many different ways. And today, with all of the audiovisual material that we have and all the possibilities, it's definitely easy to incorporate. Sometimes it's more a matter of finding the best option among many. So we need to make sure that these cultural elements are also interconnected and that we create activities that invite for intercultural exchange, right? It's not just learning about Costa Rica or about France. It is about learning, okay, how do they do it there? How do they approach this issue? How do we approach it here? So we can help ourselves with all of the audiovisual materials that we have at our reach. And I wanted to highlight some of the bibliography that we have used here, and definitely I would like to thank especially the California Department of Education for all the great information about world language standards that has been extremely useful for us today to create this session. And we would also love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so one question we have in here is, I believe reporteros may not be appropriate for first-time exposure to Spanish with MS students. Would that be correct?
For first-time exposure students at middle schools, it is definitely a book that can be used both at middle and high school, with middle and high school students. We do have a lot of teachers that are using them in both contexts because actually the level 1 of Reporteros and of its sister series Reporter Francophone can also come with the option of 1A, 1B, which is a split version of that level. And sometimes middle schools, due to the pacing, and how it is taught, they prefer to just split that first level into 2 different years. But yes, it can definitely be used for either. It would not be obviously a good book for elementary students, but for middle school and high school, definitely yes.
Perfect. There is also another question about the program. I'm gonna make like a small parenthesis in here. So we will also put our email address for the marketing department and the link for all our consultants in case you have any more questions about the programs. But we have one here, which is a teacher who teaches French in a cyber setting. And if there is a digital version of Reporter Francophone, or if we offer other digital programs. We do, absolutely, but Ivan, perhaps you can give some more details about this.
Yes, for sure. It is a great question. So we do have a print version of the books, and there is also a print workbook and a print teacher's edition. But all of those print versions also have an ebook version on our digital platform. So in our digital platform, we do have those ebooks of all 3. We also have the interactive activities that appear in the textbook and the workbook that you can later, obviously those interactive ones are the ones that you can assign for your students to complete. And our digital platform also has a lot of resources for the students and definitely a lot of resources for you, the teacher. It has lesson plans, it has those rubrics that I was mentioning before. It does have a lot of differentiation materials, also materials for heritage speakers. Many of these are downloadable that you can use. So definitely it's a very flexible program. There are people who like to use only the digital version, others who like to use the print version, others who like to use both.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ivan. Let's see, because I think we got another question. Let me just double check. Well, also another question about the materials, which is about the printed copies for textbook and practice workbook. If we offer that, which we do, but again, perhaps you can give us more insight on that.
Printed copies, do they mean exactly like making copies of it, or like just the actual?
I believe it should be for the printed versions for the textbook and for the workbook.
Yes, so what the workbook does, the textbook does have a lot of activities. Actually, some of the ones, the activities that I showed are from the textbook, but definitely the workbook can be a great addition to expand and revisit on those activities. So a lot of times what we provide for the workbook is a suggestion to use it as once you have taught your main lesson with the textbook activities, you can use the workbook activities as homework, as review, and definitely do expand a lot of that. They provide a lot more practice for the grammar and vocabulary, but they also do provide a lot of this communicative context for it. So they're both definitely great. And the great thing is that if you are actually interested and if you have never worked with our books before and you're interested with working with them, we can definitely set up a demo account in which, since all of the print materials also have their digital version, you can explore both the textbook, the workbook, compare them, see if you would be interested in having both in print or just one of them. As I mentioned, it's definitely a very flexible series.
Fantastic, Ivan. Thank you. So far, we don't have any additional questions. So again, Ivan, thank you so much. It was very interesting, super clear, and we will forward any additional questions for you.
Thank you so much, Sabrina, and thank you everyone for being here today. I hope it helped you, and thank you so much for all you do for language learning.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening.